A major security scare unfolded Saturday night at the White House Correspondents Dinner in Washington, D.C. President Donald Trump was safely evacuated after gunfire erupted outside the ballroom.
The president, vice president, and members of the cabinet were all rushed out of the room and are safe. The suspected shooter is in custody. Let's bring in White House producer and reporter Olivia Rinaldi right now to tell us exactly what else happened. The chaos tonight. White House, after shots were fired at the White House Correspondents Dinner, the president, vice president, and members of the cabinet were all rushed out of the room and are safe. The suspected shooter is in custody. Let's bring in
at the Washington Hilton. I was seated at the back of the room. We were near the entrance where people were funneling in. We had just sat down for dinner, conversation was flowing, and then all of a sudden we heard what sounded like 3 to 4 successive shots. Originally, it sounded like plates had fallen, loud noises, but I was there in Butler. That was gunfire, and we knew it. We jot down, got on the ground, got under the tables. Everyone was gathered underneath there. We could also smell the gunpowder that was fired. We sat under there what felt like a lifetime, but was really about 20 to 30 seconds, maybe about a minute, until we were able to get up. We heard agents yelling. They were going into the kitchen to try to figure out where these shots were coming from, to try to clear the area. We know that there were kitchen staff that were in there that were held at gunpoint, that held their hands up to signal that they were not a threat as Secret Service was trying to secure the area. Then what happened, I saw Steve Scalise, who is the House Majority Leader. He was ushered out. Of course, he was the subject of his own assassination attempt back in 2017. He was ushered out, as were other members of the cabinet, including the Defense Secretary, the Energy Secretary, the Interior Secretary. Up on the dais, we saw the president, the first lady, his press secretary, and the vice president all be ushered out, along with our own Wei Zhang, who was sitting right there. All of them were taken out. After a while, it was just a bit of unsure feeling in that ballroom. We weren't sure what actually happened, as everything happened so quickly. Then shortly after, the Secret Service told us to leave the area. So some of us started leaving. I left through a galley kitchen with other members of the press. Once we were out on the street, we then walked as far as we could, got into an Uber with some of our colleagues who drove by, and then tried to make it to our bureau in downtown Washington. Nearly every single street that we passed was shut down because President Trump was still at that ballroom, and there were questions about whether or not he would continue, whether he would go on. On Truth Social, he wrote, "It was quite an evening. D.C. law enforcement and Secret Service acted quickly and bravely." He said the shooter was apprehended. He recommended that the show go on, but he said that would be entirely guided by law enforcement. Some members of our staff, including Ed O'Keefe, as well as other members of the press, waited there in that ballroom. Ultimately, though, Secret Service said it is not safe. They got the president back to the White House, where the president said that he would be giving a press conference in 30 minutes. That was a True Social he posted a little bit ago. So you can see right there the press briefing podium. We are waiting to hear from the president. Members of his staff are there. I can see them in the press briefing podium, press briefing room, trying to put the presidential seal on the podium, which signifies that the president is going to speak. I also want to point out, in that press briefing room right there, our own Wei Zhang, going right from the White House Correspondents' Dinner to the front room, the front row there at the press briefing room, to talk to the president about what happened tonight. So that's where we are right now. We are waiting to hear from the president. We have reporting from our own Nicole Skanga and Richard Escobedo that one of the rounds that were fired actually hit a Secret Service agent in his bulletproof vest. We are told the agent is expected to be okay, but this was a significant and scary event tonight at the Washington Hilton, where the president was set to address reporters tonight in the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Olivia, you were there, and I also want to bring in correspondent Natalie Brand. She was also at the dinner tonight. And Natalie, what did you see from your perspective?
I was seated at a table right next to Olivia. So we were in the back, right next to the door where these gunshots could be heard. Boom, boom, boom. At first, like Olivia said, it didn't sound like a gunshot, maybe perhaps a platter crashing to the floor, plates crashing. My colleague sitting next to me, Torrance, realized right away what this was, the gravity of the situation. He threw us basically to the floor. We all crawled under tables, colleagues huddled together, huddled, hugging, praying that we would all be safe. And thankfully, we were inside that room. Then there was some confusion and chaos. Some people saying that we should evacuate, others that we should stay. We ended up leaving. This may have had to do with the president wanting the show to go on, but then noting that it was up to his Secret Service to assess the situation. Obviously, thousands of people were there. We all went through security. Our purses were checked. We went through the mags like you would at a major event or a campaign rally. But the difference is there were just so many people, the volume of people. It felt like it didn't take too terribly long to get through security. And obviously, given what's happened, this type of situation sadly was on our minds that this could be a possibility. Thankfully, we made it out.
Were there protesters outside of the building as you were all going inside, Natalie?
There was a small group of protesters, maybe a dozen or so. In past years, it seemed like the demonstrations have been larger, so it wasn't completely out of the ordinary. We were quickly escorted in. Obviously, we sensed that security would be extremely tight. There would be a perimeter around the hotel, the property, given that the president was going to be in attendance tonight.
Well, senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang is president of the White House Correspondents Association and joins us on the phone. Weijia, you were at the podium at one point. You were in the room. Talk about what you saw.
Mic check 1 3 1.
I was in the room sitting at the head table with President Trump. We were having dinner conversation when all of a sudden we saw Secret Service agents approaching the head table and told us to get down, get down, get down. I immediately went down, as did President Trump and the First Lady and all of our board members. Nobody knew anything about what was happening. And we were escorted off the stage, and there was a long period of time when nobody knew anything. Obviously now we have the basic information of what happened, and we are waiting for President Trump to come to the podium at the White House in the briefing room to talk about what he knows so far, to update the nation about this extremely scary event. You guys were just talking about the sheer amount of people that were gathered. It's 2,600 people. It was not only the president and first lady, but almost his entire cabinet was there, along with the vice president. So this is an incredibly high-profile room, and we just want to know more about what unfolded tonight.
The president indicated on his Truth Social page that he wanted this event to continue after this. You had indicated that as well. What transpired in terms of why it did not continue?
Well, obviously, when something like this happens, Secret Service is immediately in action and securing the entire area and looking for potential reasons to either stay or go from an event. And it was their decision that the best thing was to leave for security reasons. And so I did come to the White House with President Trump, and we are waiting for him now.
Weijia, when you went back up to the podium to say that the event would not continue, you were obviously very emotional, very shaken. Talk about what was going through your mind at that moment.
Well, what was going through my mind is my 7-year-old daughter was there, my husband was there, my parents were there, and it just is a huge reality check. And I think, on a night where we all came together to celebrate the freedoms in the First Amendment, we also have to think about how fragile they are in this country because, shootings and would-be shootings happen every day. And it doesn't matter if it's, the White House Correspondents Dinner or anywhere else in this country. Nobody should have to feel that way. Nobody should have to feel scared to be anywhere in a public place. And that is not what this country is about. So I think that I was just pretty rattled because we were still waiting for more information and details.
Talk a little bit more, Weijia, about the significance of this dinner for people at home who may not, really know why it's so important.
This dinner is all about acknowledging how vital the First Amendment is to our democracy. So every year, the Correspondents Association comes together to do that and honor award winners and scholarship recipients who want to be reporters like us. It's also a chance for the press and the president to get together in a different context and recognize the important relationship, despite how complicated it might be. So that's what we were doing. And unfortunately, this traumatic event unfolded, and thank goodness everybody is safe. And that's the most important thing out of all of this.
Let's talk a little bit, Weijia, about the types of security concerns leading up to an event like this where you have the president, the vice president, so many high-profile dignitaries in the room all together at one time.
Well, this is like any other event that the President of the United States attends. Obviously, weeks go into preparing, into making sure that it is going to be a secure area, and there is heavy, heavy security to even get into the perimeter of the building, which is why we, are still eager to learn more information about how this security incident happened. But anywhere you go near the hotel for this event, there are Secret Service agents, there are law enforcement agents. It is heavily, heavily, filled with people who are there to protect not only the president but everyone else who's there. So I will say it was, very quick when we heard alerts that something was wrong. We saw just an entire flood of Secret Service agents ushering us out. I actually have to prepare for this press conference now, but I will check in with you later.
Go ahead and prepare. We have Matt Gutman on the line with us now to talk a little bit about what you saw, Matt.
Right.
What's going on? I'm like, this is
Were
not.
the shots outside or inside?
Inside.
Well, inside, but outside the ballroom.
Okay, so we're going to get to him in a second, but CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Skanga was also at the dinner and has some new information for us right now.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
I can.
So what we know right now is that the suspect has been transported to Howard Hospital in Washington, D.C., that the suspect had both a shotgun and a handgun on his person when he opened fire. And we're told by law enforcement sources that the suspect had approached the security perimeter for the event. So for those who don't know, there are magnetometers that line the basement of the Washington Hilton's ballroom Everyone has to go through security to get into the event. They have to be magged. Oftentimes they're hand-wanded. We're told that the suspect was approaching where that security perimeter was set up when he opened fire on a U.S. Secret Service agent, striking that agent at least once. We are told that agent took at least one round, but will survive, is doing okay, was wearing, of course, a bulletproof vest. We're told in total there were around 5 to 8 shots fired. And again, both that agent and the suspect who is now in custody have been transported to different area hospitals in Washington, D.C. What I can tell you is that we heard approximately 5 or 6 gunshots from where we were seated inside the dinner. They seem to be coming almost from directly outside, and we were near the exit. When we heard that, Secret Service immediately directing us to get down, get down. I was seated next to our national security contributor, Sam Vinograd, who, of course, has training. We immediately went underneath our tables where we were covered there. But it was a flurry of gunfire. It was not as if we heard shots and then more shots later. We're told there were 5 to 8 gunshots in succession, and the threat was immediately neutralized. And again, both the Secret Service agent who neutralized the threat and the suspect transported to area hospitals. The only person we are told suffering critical injuries right now is the gunman.
You mentioned Sam Vinograd, and actually that's our CBS News national security contributor who is joining us now herself. Sam, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Okay, tell us what you saw.
Well, having been seated next to Nicole and other colleagues, we heard a succession of shots fired and quickly got under the table. From that point, there was certainly a lot of movement as individuals were trying to get to safety. And I will say that protective details leapt into action instantaneously. We heard and saw U.S. Secret Service and other protective details immediately shield their protectees, cabinet officials, the president and vice president, and very quickly move them to safety. We stayed under the table for several minutes to ensure that the environment around us was secure enough to depart. And then from there, moved outside of the ballroom. Very quickly after that, the U.S. Secret Service and several other law enforcement agencies present on the site, which is unsurprising based on the scale and scope of this event, and the number of not just U.S. dignitaries present, but also foreign officials present, French ambassador, Belgian ambassador, the list goes on. They started clearing areas of the ballroom lobby and escorting individuals out of the exit. So clearly, the threat response measures were activated quite efficiently. The question, of course, is why the threat detection measures and the physical security on site allowed this individual to get up to the magnetometers. Typically, security planning for an event like this would have been months in the making, and there should have been a multi-layered security apparatus in place, multiple checkpoints to ensure that no individual who wasn't authorized to be on site was there, that no individual with a weapon or weapons could get close enough. Now, I will just say we don't know this individual was someone who came up off the street, an individual who was staying at the hotel, for example, or someone who did have an invitation to the event. That will all become more readily available in the hours ahead.
And those are the questions that they're going to have to answer. How did this happen? You talked about the immediate response within seconds, but what lapse was there that allowed this person to get as close as he or she did? But right now, we're going to go to CBS News chief correspondent Matt Gutman joining us now. You were there as well, Matt.
Clarissa, I was about 3 tables up from the dais. And at first, our only warning was the clattering of plates. We heard platters fall. We saw people behind us in sort of a wave begin to duck and take cover beneath tables. And then my table, everybody ducked as well. We saw the president suddenly surrounded by Secret Service. And within a second, he was gone. We just couldn't physically see him anymore. I began to maneuver towards the center hallway or the center aisle where there was Secret Service, DHS, running towards the dais, trying to clear the room. And then one by one, Clarissa, you saw the VIPs in the room begin to be bundled off. We saw Pete Hegseth. We saw RFK Jr. right next to us, his wife Cheryl Hines, Stephen Miller. One by one, they were bundled off. They were sort of carried and taken out of the room. And very quickly, the room was cleared of these cabinet members. I think one of the last ones to be taken out was Scott Bessent. I followed some of the officers as they were running out of the room, yelling, "Police, police," trying to part through the crowd, going through the doorways. And there I saw where we believe they had taken the president, who was near the press pool, in an elevator lobby. He had gone downstairs. And then I saw a couple of those officers that I had been following run out with a medical bag and run up to the lobby of the hotel, where we believe they were trying to render first aid. Outside, the president was kept downstairs for a period of time because when I got outside, I was able to see the presidential beast, those massively armored Cadillacs, still parked outside. It was a short time later that the president was taken out, obviously at the White House now and safe. You know, it is incredibly rare for something like this to happen, an attempt on the president, not so much this president, the third attempt, but how public it was in front of essentially almost every reporter in Washington and people from around the world is incredibly rare, so public, so visible, so conspicuous. And again, you have been talking about this so far. The questions: how did someone with any sort of weapon manage to get in? Where was the security? And I think what a lot of people don't understand at home, it was my first time here, how crowded that room is. You are shoulder to shoulder, cheek to jowl with all these people. There must be 1,500 people in that room. So to maintain security and to keep it has to be an incredibly difficult task. And still, you expect that there is reason to believe that every precaution will be taken. We hope that that is the case. This investigation is going to be very key. I'm sure it's going to be very thorough because there are many questions to be answered. And going forward, and we'll talk to Nancy Cordes about this as well, one wonders about how often the president will be allowed out in public. How will he address people? What will security look like going forward? These are massive questions after tonight. And again, I cannot imagine a more public forum for an attempted assassination to take place. It is reminiscent of obviously Butler, but also the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. back in 1968. Clarissa.